Hi guys, it is Lily from Crafting Through Mental Health, and today's question is, do autistic people and people with Asperger's have feelings? Straight answer, yeah, they do. Children and even some adults with autism and Asperger's just find it very hard to understand emotions and struggle to sort of express their own. That's why sometimes, especially with severe cases, they can seem very monotone and sort of like they don't have any emotions, but that is far from true. Everyone has emotions. Most children and toddlers start picking up emotions from their parents. They start expressing it more sort of around the 1 year stage. Even before that, sort of first smiles and stuff like that, they start being able to express their emotions and show them a little bit more. Tends to be in tantrums and stuff like that when they're learning, and as they get older they get to adapt with their emotions better. But someone with autism will find it a lot more difficult. Actually, not having tantrums was one of the first things that my doctors realised in me, that there's something not quite right. With my speech therapy as well, luckily I had already had that help there, so there were other specialists there that were like, this is probably the cause of it. My mother obviously was very happy that I did not have tantrums and was very a passive sort of happy child, but I wasn't able to sort of express my emotions and also sort of read others' emotions very well. So children and some adults with autism find it very hard to read emotions from facial expressions, also copy and use the facial expressions and emotions to show that what their emotions are like. So inside they could be really sad or happy, but they don't really know how to cope with showing that. We may seem to lack empathy, but what I believe is actually once the person with autism understands that the person is either upset or angry, especially if it is pointed at them, that they can find it very hard to cope with that and find it very difficult to cope with that, get upset themselves. So there is empathy there. I also am a believer that, if anything, it's not that people with autism and Asperger's don't have emotions, they actually find it extremely hard to cope with them. There is a theory that suggests that people with autism and Asperger's, rather than lack empathy, they actually feel the emotions too much to be able to cope, which I am a true believer of. I believe that, if anything, you're oversensitized to it. I watched a documentary last night called Can You Rebuild the Brain? It was on totally different things, but they were talking about autism and sort of using these prone things to put through your brain. It was kind of a little bit scary because you can kind of play God with that, but there was one guy that did the treatment, if you want to call it that, and he was autistic, and he actually suffered more from it because he was more awake with his emotions. So in some ways autism can sort of shield you from that. It can give you that sort of thicker skin. When I was younger I was very literal, and sometimes still am. I had it recently where I was saying to my mum, like, there was a hashtag being like, what couples get most, like, stupid things couples get annoyed at, and I said one of them is breathing too loud, and I've definitely done that. Normally they've annoyed you with something else and then you can just hear their breathing and you're just like, ugh. Anyway, so I said that about my partner, and my mum was like, yeah, he does really have loud breathing, and my mind just went poof. And I was like, oh my god, you know when times where someone tells you something and then you can't unsee it? I was like, I just pictured my wedding day just being there, and he's there like and I'm like, I can't live with this. So I took it literal and I was like, oh my god, have I just never noticed that he breathes really loud? And she's like, then she went along with it to take the pee out of me, but she was like, no. I was like, you're joking, right? You gotta be joking. And she's like, yeah, why did you pick that up so literal? Because I'm pretty good now, but as a child there were times where there was one time where these kids, I didn't get them in trouble, but they sort of got themselves in trouble, but involved me. They were like, you're so dead, like, you know, that said that sort of thing, and I just like looked down, went like totally confused, and was like, no I'm not, and just walked off, oblivious. It went over my head. So in a way it sort of protected me from worrying that they were going to beat me up later. They didn't. It really was fine, but you know, it at the end of the day that could have been a threat, so that protected me from me worrying about it. But if it was a threat, then I haven't been able to protect myself from that. So it really is a catch-22. You are protected in certain ways, but in other ways you're not. And I feel like this guy on the documentary, he said he was protected with his autism. I personally, he seemed better, but I was like, the traits you're still talking about do still seem very autistic. It sort of oversensitized those emotions. He was saying he couldn't watch a movie with, you know, upsetting scenes or anything, and I was like, I think you just haven't learned how to control those emotions. And I think a lot of autistic people can overfeel those emotions. I definitely think I did growing up, overfeel those emotions. Sometimes now I do. It's like an oversensitized version of it, where some people might have it. Everyone's different on a spectrum. Everyone's different in, you know, out of the spectrum as well. So, you know, you might be finding this familiar, but you don't have autism. It's, you know, it's one of those things. But everybody's different. So some people might find they don't understand that, so their lack of emotion is a little bit more dulled, where some people might have it too much. And that's why there's campaigns on to sort of be like too much information, because autistic people do find it very hard to have too much information. I notice that I can't really cope. If someone's talking to me here and here and there's like loads of noise, I blank out a little bit because I can't focus on more than a couple of things. Like most of the time I'm fine, but sometimes I do find that, and I can see how I have a very mild case, so I can see how someone with more severe cases can find that very, very difficult. And with saying being literal, I also found sarcasm very hard. I know Americans find this quite hard, but being British, we do have a lot of dry humour and sarcasm. If anything, I think it's also taught me to understand it too well, so I'm quite good with sarcasm. So in a way, when people are like, would you take your autism away? I'm like, I don't think so, because that would change who I am. With that, I think, yeah, I have gone to the extreme of like knowing it too well and being quite good at it, because also where I'm very literal, people see me as literal. So if I do take like a joke or something, then it's more funny, because it's like, whoa, didn't see that coming. But yeah, growing up, I definitely, like I said earlier, was like, what are people talking about? And in a way that does make you feel a bit like an outsider when everyone's joking about stuff. And they do say this in autistic books and stuff like that, that people do find it very difficult to fit into a group and find it like certain things funny. Luckily, I've kind of learnt how to pick that up and understand it more, where when I was a lot younger you could see it a lot more. Like where people say, wow, you do not seem autistic, it's sort of because I've been kind of trained out of those traits, which I don't know if the right word to use, but you know, sort of been helped out of those traits in a way. I also, like, I don't remember this at all. I don't really remember, I think a lot of people get this, they don't really remember loads of stuff out of their childhood. My mum said that one time I walked in on her crying and whoosh, no, nothing there. And now, you know, I'm very good at picking up emotions, if not more better than some people that don't have autism and stuff like that. But I'm lucky, I'm very mild on that case. People with severe autism or slightly severe than me may find that more difficult. Also, when I was younger, and I was about 9, I suffered from what are called shutdowns. I feel like it's not very heard of, especially even in like the sort of autism sort of thing of it, and maybe more on the mild side. I know that on the severe side people don't cope as well. I don't know if they also call that shutdowns. But I used to have such an overload of emotions going to school. There was a lot of changes happening. Like my friends were moving schools, you know, there was a lot of things happening in this year. And I also suffered from anxiety then as well. So going to school, I don't remember this because they are not very good for you to shut down. So if you have a child that are suffering from shutdowns, it is always better to go to the doctor and stuff like that, because they do, I'm sure they've probably got more research, but what they told my mother when I was 9, they do start to kill off brain cells and they can affect memory and stuff like that. So they're not good to have. But that is what they told. They might be advanced, like, found out more about them. Anyway, so I had those when I was little because I had an overload, and it would literally, basically, shut down my brain. I used to kind of apparently collapse. Yeah, again, I don't have any memory of this. It got wiped out of my system. Before school, I used to just kind of go out of it and then come back. But I think it must have been very stressful for my mum, but that is sort of a thing of not being able to cope. So if anything, I think more autistic people find it very difficult to cope with changes. They are sort of known to not like change in routine, especially on more severe cases, and even mild cases, it's sort of one of the first sort of signs of it. So therefore, change in own emotions and other emotions may be too stressful to cope with. So please keep that in mind if you know someone who is autistic, especially more on the severe cases, because that is what they find very, very difficult. I was very lucky in a way. I do believe that they could have done better. Where I was taught in school with my autism and stuff like that, I think they could have improved on it. I think they are getting better now, but I would eventually like them to get even better with it. I always say that autistic people, I always kind of got told that their brain is wired differently. I think everyone's is wired differently. They're sort of, we pick up stuff differently. Like reading and writing, most people will sound it out when they're reading. I can't do that. I do it all from memory. So someone will tell me that's what that word is and that's how I read it. I still struggle with reading and writing today, and also the British language is very, very bloody difficult. I will try and sound something out and I cannot do it. So I had that sort of side of it. So with speech therapy, they also sort of taught me how to read emotions and stuff like that. I mean, there are famous things from my past where they were like, describe a dog, and I just could only focus on how long the nose was, but you were meant to say like 4 legs, and barks. I don't know, how would I describe a dog? Like, so I got help with that. So they did teach me, most of it was visual, so this is what someone looks like when they're happy, they're feeling this, when you're feeling like that, you'll let out this sort of emotion. So it's all a bit like that. I talked to my mum. She works in a special needs school, so with children that suffer from a lot more severe and can't be in mainstream school. So she works with other autistic people who are a lot worse than I am, so very much on the severe cases. And she says visuals are really amazing. So if you've got a kid with autism or you suspect this is a big thing, please get them checked out. I know it sounds horrible. Please diagnose your kid and put a label on them. I'm a big believer that labels are a good thing, like e.g. depression. Having that label there is actually better because you will be able to get help for it, rather than, because you still have it. You're going to still have autism if you don't have the label. You're going to still have depression if you don't have the label. Having that label actually helps. It can help tell your school so they can then teach you in that certain way. My school just tried to teach me on the mainstream side, where really they should have gone, actually she thinks differently, let's teach her this way. Because I had one-on-one help at certain points, so they could have easily have done that, but you know, that was in the past and it's worked out okay now. I also know people on the same sort of lines of me, very mild or slightly worse, who are adults and didn't get help. I've noticed that they still find it hard to read a situation. So if everyone's kind of peed off in the room, you know, upset about something, they find it very difficult to read that and respond badly to it. They might say the wrong thing. I can see how I would have turned out if I never got any help, because I feel like having help, people taught me how to be a bit more positive with it, to read emotions and understand people, just to help with that. And I think that's helped brilliantly, where you can see how people can end up if they don't get any help. And help is one of those like words where you're like, I don't want to get help, but needing help isn't a bad thing. If you have to get your child extra help or get yourself extra help, if you need to go to therapy, if you stuff like, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. You might think that on yourself, and if people think that badly of you, you need to get them out of your life. They shouldn't, but if someone's like, that's not good. No, it's not how it is. We're not perfect. No one is perfect. No one's walking around like, I know people that are like, literally, like, I don't actually have anything attached. And I'm like, what? You have nothing to your name, like autism, depression, anxiety. I'm like, what? Okay. But no one's perfect. We all go through those roller coasters in life. Sometimes some people get it worse. Sometimes people have it better. But needing that help is not a bad thing. And please, please, please give your child help. Please do not be like, oh, I'm not going to give my child that name. My child is perfect. No child is perfect. And your child can still be perfect if they're autistic. It's not them. I'm Lily. I'm not this autistic girl. I am my own person. And yes, I have autism and I fit into that category of people, which is okay. It's okay, and it's okay to struggle with things. There's still, to this day, I still struggle from stuff from my autism. But at the same time, I do not let it put a full stop. I can't stand when people are like, oh, they're autistic and that's their full stop. No, you can still get help. You can still learn to adapt. Obviously, on the more severe cases, it's a little bit harder. But yet again, there are special needs schools and people out there who can help sort of give that person, whether it be you or a family member, your kid, a brother or sister, sort of a better quality of life. That's like saying about a child without autism or a normal kid, not sending them to school. It's that school education is going to give them a better outlook on life. So there is that whole thing on there. So please do get your children help. I really, really recommend it. As a child who went through the system, went to the special needs classes, yes, there is improving needing to do. They are improving a lot more. They're a lot more better than when they taught me, because it was still not a new thing, but like the generation before me, like I know people that were never diagnosed that would have been diagnosed, and even people in my year got diagnosed very late, where now, yes, you have labels on everything. You have dyslexics, and in a way it's like puts you in this little box, and you get put in these boxes, and it doesn't seem very nice in a school system. But in the end of the day, if they can go, oh, you're dyslexic, we can reteach you how to read and write in your own way and give you that extra help, therefore you can catch up with others, because we're all different. Like, someone might be brilliant at art and someone might be brilliant at science. That's okay. The school system do need to change, because they are very sort of, we will teach every child the same, but we won't teach them taxes and stuff like that. They need to come up with the modern age. A lot of things have changed over the last 100 years. So yeah, giving that label, sometimes it's terrifying as a parent, but it is the best thing that it's going to give to your child. So out of this whole topic, I personally believe that obviously people with autism and Asperger's do have emotions. They just find it very difficult to express them, to understand others. So they do have empathy, but in a different way than others do, and they need to learn how to pick up. They find it more difficult to learn than people without autism. But I also believe that instead of having no emotions or lack of emotions, a lot of autistic people can be sensitive to sound, to light, to lots of different things, to change. I think they can also be very sensitive to their own emotions and find that very difficult to express, to understand, to cope with it. So please, please, please be just kind to each other. I'm sure you will be if you're watching this. It's just understanding what other people go through as well. Everybody is different. You don't walk up to someone. A lot of people don't know that they know because I'm on here, but when I meet people in my life, they don't expect me to be autistic. It's an invisible condition. You can't tell by looking at someone, and that is the same for a lot of other different things. So when you're meeting people for the first sort of time, please give them the benefit of the doubt if they aren't coping. If there is a situation like the campaigns for too much information, if there is like an accident or something and one person isn't coping, that might be because they have autism or something similar that they can't take in that sort of emotion. It's sort of like the flight or fight mode. They might not be able to cope with that sort of thing. Some people are really good and go into action. Some people just blank out. So we don't know what goes on behind closed doors. We don't know about people's past. Even if you know someone really well, you still sometimes don't know. So give people the benefit of the doubt. That is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any pointers or situations, leave them down below in the comments. If I've missed anything out, you can also comment that as well, because it is such a massive spectrum and everyone's different, so I probably have missed stuff out. I tried to do some research and chat to my mum, who works with more severe cases, and I'm mild, so I can kind of balance that out. Anyway, if you haven't already, please subscribe and like this video if you did, and I will see you guys next week. I hope you have a fabulous week, and I'll see you then. Love ya.